It's so good. It's so good. Xander Jones, ladies and gentlemen, for the win. Love it. It's like a John Carpenter vibe. Can't stand watching Rogan. Bro Jogan? You don't like Bro Jogan? I like classic Bro Jogan. The Brian Redband days and the early days. It's weird to think how God, I started watching Bro Jogan when he first came out. Like that was back in was that early 2000s, 2006, 2007, something like that. It's wild. He was doing it from his living room at one point. It looked like he was doing it from his couch. And he would do like one every 2 or 3 weeks. And he just kept doing them. And then eventually it just took off. And it was so weird to watch. But like the guests in the early days were really, really cool. They're still good, but I don't know. I feel like he's not as into it as he used to be. I don't know. It's just my 2 cents. Welcome back, guys. It's Night Shift Live. Night shift days. It's 2 p.m. for me, but it's night shift for somebody. So this Ross Coulthart, Lou Elizondo interview is supposed to happen tonight at 9 o'clock, I think, Eastern time. Is that right? UFO hunters? I think so. And so they've been putting out some clips from this interview. And one of them dropped yesterday, and it was Lou. I don't know if anybody saw this, if any of you guys caught this, but it's Ross Coulthart talking to Lou about implants. And that's really funny timing because I've got a really, really interesting and dark interview that's going to happen on Monday about implants and not of the alien variety, not the boob variety. And it's just so weird. It kind of like worked out. So I thought we'd take a look at that clip today. And then I've got some implant stuff to show you, which is kind of weird. It's just sort of like a side interest. And I've been following it for off and on for years. So the fact that it all kind of came together and crystallized in this way is really fortuitous. Who's Joe Rogan? Never heard of him. The implant chapter in Imminent was insightful. I'm still working my way through Imminent. I was listening to it at the gym this morning. Like I said, when you have a kid, it's not, you don't get 3 straight hours of anything. It's more like you get 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and then you get like half an hour after they go to bed. So I'm getting it in bits and pieces, but I'm up to where am I at now? I'm up to we made it through Project Stargate, and we talked about the program. We talked about some of the sightings over the uranium mine, the sighting of in I believe it was Alaska over the ice with the object that merged many objects into one and then disappeared, and the ice was all jacked up. It's fascinating stuff. I will say this: I want to do a deeper dive, like full blast video on Imminent next week. I now have the audiobook and the other regular book. But just from where I'm at right now, it is really interesting how much he's saying the same thing that I've been saying for a long time. And I'm not trying to say like I got there first or anything. But I've been talking about this on this channel for a long time. We should be a little concerned about what's going on. The situation is more ominous than it might seem. And he asked some very good questions about if they're here to help us. They have a really strange way of doing it. And kind of challenging that argument that there's no threat. There's no reason to be concerned. And one particular part that that hit me was when he was talking about all of the different encounters that nuclear weapon silos or nuclear assets during the Cold War. And I guess I'd never heard it quite explained the way that he explains it in the book until today. And he said something along the lines of the nuclear situation is such a tinderbox, and it's so close to going up in flames at any moment, that the fact that there is an unknown element more or less just kind of fucking with it all the time, that's the problem. It's not that, like, there's no real clear evidence that they're just switching off nuclear weapons because they're friendly and they want us all to uh, be friendlier to each other. In that case, they could have stopped the 2 atomic bombs we dropped on civilians in World War II. They didn't stop any of the nuclear testing that happened over the ensuing decades. I mean, we've been exploding nuclear weapons like it's our job for decades. So what is happening, though, is they're turning them off through turning them on. They're interfering with them in different ways at different times. And our system is so sensitive to all of those things that, if anything, um, the margin for error is like zero. It's less than zero. And so there's just no room for this shit to happen. And I think I get it. I think I get it. And it just made a lot of sense to me the way he said it. And I thought, that's something we've kind of been talking about here for a long time, that it's not a settled point that there's no threat. That, I don't know where that comes from. Some people are really married to that idea, and I think that's kind of, I think it's kind of dangerous. I don't want to be an asshole about it, but I just think, how do you know? How can anybody know? How can you know what the intentions or the disposition, the intentions are, or the disposition is of an unknown number of beings or entities that are operating with impunity in, on, and around our planet and throughout the solar system in various ways? There's no way. There's just no way. So it's a wiser position to put yourself in and to say we don't know, and we should conduct ourselves accordingly. We should study it. We should learn about it. We should uh, understand what it is that we're dealing with, but we should also be ready to have the technology to try and deal with it if it becomes a problem. And I don't think that's a bad idea. And so anyway, I have a love-hate relationship with this notion because it's kind of uncomfortable to talk about and think about. You have to kind of admit that there's something else out there that's a lot smarter than we are, that may or may not have our best interest at heart, and it has technology that we have no defenses against. And then you have to look at the military-industrial complex and go, well, I'm not really a fan of the military-industrial complex, but these are the people who would, if we did need to deal with this problem, if it became a problem, these are our guys. Like, you know, you kind of have to ask yourself, what team are you on? Are you on team human or team whatever? So there's a conversation there, and I think I'm kind of back and forth on it from time to time. Um, but it comes back to the implant thing, and we'll go to that in just a second. But that's one thing I noticed about, just from where I'm at in the book, that stood out to me. And another thing that I thought was interesting was, the remote viewing stuff blew my mind. I had actually knew a lot of the history of that particular part of the remote viewing story because I've read a lot about it. But to hear it described the way that Lou describes it, it suddenly feels way more real, because it's like he's such a current figure in this moment. He didn't write a book 20 years ago. This is happening now. He's got current knowledge, up to date knowledge about how that program works and what it's doing, and he's got the historical perspective. And so to hear him describe the remote viewing program, that was pretty jaw dropping, because that suggests a lot of other really crazy things are true, which we kind of talked about on Wednesday. And he said in particular, the remote viewing program was so successful. It wasn't shut down because it wasn't successful. It was folded into a different thing because it was so successful. They didn't want to draw attention to how successful it was, so they basically pretended like they were shutting it down. But it still happens today. It happens all the time. So that's really interesting. And there was something else. So it'll come back to me. I didn't write it down, so that's my fault. Let's check the chat, see what's going on. Alan, welcome. Alan, new member. Speed listener. That opening song is a banger. It is. It is. We were just talking about that. We'll get into more detail at some point. Xander Jones says, I'm sure we'll get into it in more detail at some point, but I don't think there is an unconditional threat. I think it's highly conditional on our activity. I don't disagree with you, Xander. I think you make an excellent point. And I don't want to come off too strong on this idea. Like, I'm not out there like Alex Jones. I'm not going to like bang on the desk and, we have to call Will Smith and deal with this in some other way. I just think we can't be in such a position where we don't really know anything and also be really sure of some things. Like, it doesn't make sense to me with the amount of information that we have to work with. We have to treat this like an unknown. If you wouldn't, going outside is not inherently dangerous, but I wouldn't let my toddler wander around outside by himself without my supervision. There's dangerous things out there. And I think where I break down on this issue is where there's sort of this assumption that higher technology or an older civilization somehow automatically turns into a more peaceful, benevolent civilization. And I haven't really heard that argument ever made successfully. It's sort of assumed that it's correct, but I don't know why it would be assumed. That would be assumed. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm open to being. I'm open to changing that opinion if presented with some different evidence. We can't even say that humanity as a whole, because we aren't a monolith, so it's reasonable to assume they won't be a monolith either. That's a great point. Urinary Geller on Reality Check. Another way to look at the technological thing, let's see, Xander Jones says, unless we assume that to achieve the technological prowess they must have necessitates a standard level of maturity regarding the use of that power. That's a fair point. I guess I just look, looking at the history of Earth, there's never been a time where we weren't violently killing each other for one reason or another. Not really. We're really good at it, and we are the apex predator on this planet, at least as far as we know. So it would make sense to assume that if we come in contact with another race of beings, they're going to be the apex predator of wherever they're from. At some point, like, they had to beat out all competition and just establish some kind of dominance to have the longevity of their society so that they could achieve whatever it is that they've achieved. I at least this is just how it's landing for me. So it's kind of like AI. You don't really know what you can predict about AI. We have ideas of what the trends are, but we can say with certainty that it's going to be out of our hands once it's here. Once artificial superintelligence is here, once that there's something smarter than us in the game, how do we deal with that? That's my question. What do you just go, okay, I guess they're in charge? Is that really what the issue is? That was the other thing that Lou said in the book that caught my attention. He goes, we identify ourselves by our nationality, so it's a tribalism on a global scale, and your nationality is part of your identity, and it's part of just the way that we think about the world and our society. And admitting governments of the world admitting that there is we have contact with a higher intelligence is going to call nationality as a concept into question. And it's going to, and Danny Sheehan actually mentioned something like this when I had the opportunity to talk to him. He said that I'm sorry, no, it wasn't Danny Sheehan. It was, it wasn't Danny Sheehan. Who was it? I'm name dropping and I don't even know what the fuck I'm trying to say. Someone else whose name will come to me in a moment was saying that the thing they're very concerned about is that instead of us having multiple different origin stories, right, like the Russian history and the American lore about our society and all of these different identities, will be forced to admit that there's really only one origin story, and that is going to be the destabilizing factor, because then people will start to identify as just human beings who all pay taxes and have kids and feel pain and go to work and just want a better life, and like we'll just start identifying as people, and that's something they're really afraid of. So I've just heard that point made before, and I think that's a really interesting point that jumped out at me. Let's check the chat again. Let's see here. I'll make that argument one day. You trust me. Well, I mean, please do. Let's try. That's that would be a great show. Actually, I would love to do a point, not a hostile like argument, but like a point by point debate on just sort of the idea. Like, is it a threat? Let's just game that out and see where that goes. I think that would be really interesting. It'd be cool to get a few different perspectives on that going at the same time. KT, materialism is a game for children. That's a really interesting point. What he knows about the phenomenon makes him feel somber. UK boxer fan, I would like to know what exactly Lou specifically meant when he said that what he knows about the phenomenon makes him feel somber. So far, what I've been able to piece together, he's not convinced that this is not a threat. He's clearly not buying that. He's thinking about this like from a security perspective, and rightfully so. I think that's the way to approach it. He's saying, the more I listen to interviews and the more I watch him, he's basically saying this is a real problem. This is a real problem because these ships are, whatever they are, they're everywhere, every day, all the time, all around us, and they're huge. Some of them are enormous, the size of entire cities. So imagine like sitting in your chair, sitting in your car, looking at your phone, whatever. We're all hanging out together. We're watching Night Shift, and we're just like marveling at that song, and we're like, dude, this logo is amazing. That's great. And we're just loving on the channel, putting that vibe out there. And meanwhile, at the same time, there's like 30 Star Destroyers in orbit, and like God knows how many cloaked ships flying around at crazy, ridiculous, beyond understanding speeds. And what are at any given moment, as you sit wherever you're at, like just reading your phone? That's the vibe that Lou's putting off pretty hard right now, and I'm inclined to agree. Like, that's alarming, and that means if you just take one more step back from that, means we're not in charge. We're fucking not in charge of anything. We're left to think that we are in charge until they want to make a change or do something, and then we're not. So that's pretty somber. Even if there's no imminent attack or threat, which is kind of hard to. The name of his book is really hard to square with anything else, with any other conclusion, right? Like imminent sounds pretty straightforward to me. But there's what kind of agency do we have, really? And how is that going to show, like, what's going to happen when over the next 25, 35, 55 years, as we start to move out, build a colony on the moon, build a colony on Mars, start to inhabit the other bodies in the solar system one way or another, start to travel. I'm sure we're going to tap some of this reverse engineered technology for that. There's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't. It would be insane not to. If you're an aerospace defense contractor sitting on this kind of technology, and this is where we're at right now, you'd be crazy to not try and find a way to commercialize it, right? So we're going to see this stuff come out. But how will NHI respond to that? If we start really, if NHI is present and they're everywhere and they're monitoring us all the time, and the way Lou described it with the orbs appearing in his house, he's talking about the orbs that would just show up. He's having a barbecue with his neighbors and an orb would just fly by so often that his neighbors would comment on it. Remember that? That was crazy. And his wife is like, why are they following you? What's this got to do with you? And he was explaining that how as the phenomenon you investigate it more and more deeply, it sticks to you and it starts to like follow you around. Everything that we see, at least so far as what we're getting from Lou, indicates that we're under some kind of extreme surveillance and they're absolutely testing our defensive capabilities without question. There's no way. There's no way they're not. Uh, they're shooting holes in Abrams tanks. They're uh, flying over our nuclear facilities. They're nuclear, not nuclear. They're turning our weapons on and off. They're switching on aircraft carriers. They're turning them off. Um, they're in loitering in our training areas where our fighter pilots see them every single day, all the time for years and years and years. What does that sound like to you? Um, and I'm not trying to sound snarky when I say it that way, but I guess I'm just kind of like, for me, for my part, I look at that and I'm like, this is super alarming. Like this should more people should be concerned about this. Um, but I guess that's why I started the channel. I'm trying to find other people who see it that way. I guess. But what kind of agency do you have in a scenario like that? And I'm not a game theory expert, but can you? What happens when that NHI, that presence, we hit the singularity, which is probably going to happen within the next 2 decades? If you listen to Ray Kurzweil, by 2035, 2040, somewhere in there between 2030 and 2050, the DeLorean hits 88 miles per hour and we all see some serious shit. I think that's the best way I have come to understand it. I've been following Ray Kurzweil since his first book, The Singularity is Near. That first version came out, and it's really creepy to have read the stuff that he was saying back then. Is happening now, and you're seeing it. And some of the stuff that he's saying now is literally like just a few years away, and we're kind of watching it gear up. So how does NHI react to that? What happens if we go in the span of 100 years after we hit the singularity in 2040, and then in the next 60 years, let's say, we make 10,000 years worth of progress because of the compounding effects of artificial superintelligence and all the metamaterials and things that we're going to be able to develop and do complete and total research all inside a simulated system at amazing speeds and just spit out Nobel Prize winning information and inventions all the time. Like that's post singularity world. So how does NHI respond to that? Are they going to be okay with that? With us having that kind of power? Because it's not all about them, right? Like whatever's we're doing with whatever reverse engineered technology we have, we're doing it. Like we're on our own thing and it's taking off. It's gonna get crazy. Uh so maybe that's what imminent has something to do with. I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of inevitable conflict that arises when, if you're observing primates and you're watching them and they go in 100 years from horses and wooden wagons to driving robots on Mars and exploding nuclear weapons to kill each other and God only knows what other stuff uh, we're doing that we don't even know about. Are you going to give them another 100 years to see where they go? Or are you going to let them have another 200 or 300 years as that advancement continues to increase at an exponential rate? I don't know. I don't know. Uncertainty is a prerequisite at this point. We don't even know if these. I feel it, Xander. I'm so sorry. I'm having this whole thing. I could do like a 15-minute soliloquy, and then you have to type this out. This is not fair to you at all. You're not wrong. Uncertainty is a prerequisite at this point. We don't even know if these things are what we have been calling ghosts for centuries. Literally, all bets are off at the moment. That's a yes, for absolutely for sure. Shardul says, I think of contact in terms of historical context, the Spanish flu, introduction of guns to Japan, North Sentinel Island. Yes, absolutely. Um, Orbs, I have here's my I got to move on to the next thing because we only have half an hour. I have to keep this one brief today. Um, I need to just make a permanent graphic of this book. I'm this is weird for me that I'm mentioning it yet again because I keep bringing this book up again. But if you if when you listen to the audiobook, which I don't usually do audiobooks, but I listen to this, and the benefit of it is that I was skeptical about Lou for a while, and I've always had my questions about like kind of what his motivations are and what is, you know, what's the vibe on this guy. Um, and I think that's just healthy, just to do with everybody. He's just always maintain a little skepticism. But I have to say, like hearing him read everything in his own voice and his own words, he's very relatable and it's very convincing and it's very like okay, like I'm buying this. I'm buying this. Um, and if you take him at his word, then the remote viewing stuff is real, and this book is the one you need to read next because this book is going to tell you what the Michael Jordan of remote viewing has to say about some of the shit that's going on. And one of the things we talked about on Wednesday was when he sent his he was at Stanford Research Institute with Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ. They were working on a project. He got into this other project with a guy named Axelrod, who goes by the moniker Axelrod. They're remote viewing the moon, and he sees activity on the moon, not just a little bit, but a lot, like buildings, facilities, hangar bays with craft in them. He sees saucer-shaped craft. He sees um, complexes where people are living in them, and he sees a group of people working, and they see him. Now he's in a room at Stanford Research Institute, sitting in a chair, just kind of doing this, but in the way he tells the story, what he's seeing, the people he's looking at on the wherever on the moon, notice his consciousness observing them. I think they saw an orb. I think on their end, that's what it looks like. I think that might be what it is. Orbs seem to act like a surveillance drone. They sort of behave like they come in, they look around, they can maybe do little things like sometimes they can zap people. And give them a little scare or but it's not often that they do a whole lot else. They're just sort of around. And then you have spheres which seem to be able to do things like if you uh, the jury's out for me, but supposedly a couple of these things can get together and open a portal. I don't know, that one's kind of wild, but I think that's what the translucent orbs, it's some kind of if you project your consciousness outward and you're sending it around like a drone to look at something, people who are able to see that are going to see it in the form of some kind of orb. That's my guess. Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think? Lord McCormick, greetings. Greetings from the UK. I live in a small town called Warminster. Well, greetings, Lord McCormick. The bubbles around the orbs and UAPs. Brett Higgins says in Lou's book, he goes into the bubbles seen around the orbs and UAPs, see if there's technology that slows down time inside the bubble and makes light shift around it according to what it's doing. Yeah, I imagine that it's perfect cloaking technology. It's a perfect cloaking technology. Optically, electromagnetic radiation, like it's weird um, that you wouldn't see more of them. So, like the people who are seeing them are only seeing them when they're visible for a very short period of time. Um, but anyway, I've got to move on. Oh, I've got so much stuff. All right. So we're going to talk about implants. This was something that dropped yesterday. This is a preview from Ross Coulthart's interview with Lou Elizondo that's going to air, I believe, tonight on NewsNation at 9 o'clock. Let me find my. All right. That's William Pollack. We're going to come back to him. Here we go. All right, we're gonna play this clip and just watch this interview. It's a short clip. It's not the full interview. So we're gonna just play this back and then talk about it. Hang on one second. Let me get my.
to a NewsNation exclusive. Former Pentagon official Lou Elizondo sitting down one-on-one with NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart in a primetime exclusive interview. As part of Friday night's bombshell special report, Elizondo, who says he ran a secretive Pentagon program, shares what he claims the government really knows about UFOs.
What did you see?
I saw a technical device that had been removed, excised by the Department of Veterans Affairs by a surgeon, a trained physician from a U.S. military service member who claimed to have a UAP encounter. The physician claimed that the object tried to run on him or evade being excised.
So let me get this right. This object, whatever it is, it's a constructed object. It's a technological object.
It's a technological object enveloped in some sort of biological capsule. The current theory is that that capsule is there to fool the body.
And joining me this morning is NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart. Ross, great to see you again. I've been excited about this interview because it's a question the human race has pondered since the dawn of time. Are we alone? What did Lou tell you? And if we are not alone, according to him, why isn't the American government sharing that with us?
Well, firstly, good morning. And can I say, Lou says definitively we are not alone. In quite an extraordinary interview, the former head of the Pentagon's UFO investigation program, he goes out the gate and charges, and he's basically saying Roswell was real. And then you've got that wonderful science fiction sounding admission that he makes that they actually pulled some kind of non-human implant out of a human being, a veteran, who was in a UAP encounter, and that this implant in some way, Hannah, tried to evade being caught by the surgeon that was trying to remove it.
So is there a bigger question now about finding out how these aliens feel about us on our planet and the human race?
Well, you and I think, are probably taking it more for granted than a lot of members of the American public. I mean, I take it as a given now because of the number of people that I've spoken to in the Defense Department and the intelligence community who candidly admit that a non-human intelligence is engaging with the people of this planet. But I think most people still want firm, solid proof, and they'd like to hear it from the president standing at a lectern in the White House basically saying we are not alone. I don't think we're ever going to get that. And I think ultimately what's going to come is a gradual disclosure because of people like Mr. Elizondo coming forward from within the black world and revealing what they know. And I know some of these people. I know people who work on what they purport to be a crash retrieval program of non-human technology, and they say that they're also involved not only in those retrievals but in the reverse engineering of those craft. And I think that's the reason for the secret. I think what's happening is the United States can see it can derive an enormous military advantage, strategic advantage, from hopefully being able to develop that technology, and who can blame them? But at the same time, there's a lie being promoted. The public are being told that the US government, the Defense Department, knows nothing about any kind of non-human intelligence. And that's just not true, I believe.
Ross, for all those skeptics out there, can you give us some background on the credentials for Mr. Elizondo? What makes his experience and his claims authentic?
Mr. Elizondo was working at an extremely high level in the Pentagon with the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense Intelligence in the Defense Department when he was assigned to run the Pentagon's UFO investigation program along with other colleagues. And in the course of that investigation, it's quite clear he was briefed about things that I think the public aren't allowed to know. He's only been allowed to speak to us within a very narrowly confined publication security review that's been approved by the Defense Department, and he's been stopped from revealing quite a number of things. His new book, Imminent, actually has redactions in it, Hannah, where it's basically not allowed to disclose things that he wanted to tell the public. And so
Yes.
I think one of the problems that he faces, and a lot of these officials face, is that they're constrained by their security oath. They're patriots. They're not going to do anything to block the protection.
Okay. I'm going to go to my Lou graphic. You ready for this? Here you go. Somebody put this up on Reddit, and I just thought it was the funniest thing. It's awesome. Okay. Where do you even start? NewsNation. I don't know about you guys, but when I look at this, whatever NewsNation is, this feels like it's propaganda to me. Like that's just what it feels like. I have nothing to really base that on. 90% of the shit that I say here is just based on a hunch. I really don't know. But it seems awfully weird, right? Like nobody, I don't know a single person. I had never, I'm a news nerd, as much as anybody. I'd never heard of News Nation, never looked at their website, never come across these people at all, ever. And I didn't know, I don't know anybody who knew about them as a serious like news source until Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, David Grush, all this stuff. And I'm not making like, I don't want to say I know for a fact that they're up to no good or there's some kind of nefarious intent, or I don't know. I have no idea. I could be completely wrong. But something about this just feels really like it's so produced. It's one bit like it's a commercial for Lou's book, which is weird because if you're a journalist, I don't know, that just feels weird to be like pushing the book. I know that they obviously are besties, Coltart and Lou. Every interview you see them do together, they've talked about all this stuff for hours beforehand. Like it's nothing new. So it's all very choreographed. And I realize how that might sound. I don't mean it to sound like I'm not accusing Ross Coulthard and the people at NewsNation of trying to perpetrate some kind of weirdness on us. But I am asking the question. I mean, does anybody else feel this way? It seems a little weird, right? Like look at everything about their whole setup. It looks like a perfectly legitimate news organization. Here's a fun fact. A few weeks ago, well, no, was it what year was this? Someone sent me a clip of Steve Greenstreet at the New York Post talking about how he used to work for the US State Department writing propaganda for a fake news site that was targeted at people in other countries. And he had a security clearance to do this. And he's talking like openly about this. And the idea of this site was that it was supposed to look like legitimate news. And even though it was a propaganda piece. And that's kind of like the idea, right? So I am just putting it out there. News Nation has the perfect combination of red, white, and blue. Everybody on it looks very professional. They look very, very smart and like
Ross Coulthart
and cool, and like they know what's going on. The news segments themselves look very produced and it looks like everything is legit. Something about it just doesn't feel. Something about it just feels a little fake to me. And I can't quite put my finger on it. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there, but we're here to talk about implants. So discuss, but let me know what you think. I'm curious. So I started doing some digging because I had looked at the implant thing before and I thought it was really interesting. It's come up again and again. I am kind of, I found the abduction phenomenon, particularly the period of the mid 90s to early 2000s or early 90s to 2000s, depending on what you're looking at. There was a lot of conversation about alien abductions and people having encounters where they were taken against their will on board a craft, and then things were done to these people. They're sent back, and then often they would turn up with implants of one kind or another later. and they would see these implants in x-rays, or they would turn up in medical exams, or they would have weird symptoms. Whitley Strieber has an implant that he's talked about a lot. And so that got me thinking, and I looked at that a little bit more, and then I discovered Carla Turner's work on as an abductee herself, reporting her own experiences. And notably, Carla Turner was hesitant to even say that she knew these things were alien or extraterrestrial. To her credit, she was like, we just don't know what we're dealing with, and that's a problem. But implants are a real thing, abductions are happening, and da-da-da. And she was the first person who kind of brought up the term, at least for me. I had never heard the term MILABs before, military abductions. I say MILABs, some people say MILABs, but I say tomato, tomato. But a military abduction where people are taken by us and then implanted with stuff. And that's kind of dark. And then they're made to think that they were abducted, but maybe they weren't. Or even darker, they were abducted by a non-human or extraterrestrial, and then they were returned, and then they were abducted by us so that we could figure out what we could learn from the person who was just abducted. So maybe that's happening too. The point is that all of these cases, and there are plenty of them. There was a guy named Roger Lear, Dr. Lear. We're going to talk about him in just a second, who was a podiatrist who did surgery on at least 17 people, where he took out implants, and those implants were later analyzed in very high-end laboratories. And what they found was kind of unusual. And I'm doing an interview on Monday with a person who is a researcher that specializes in implants, and he is going to blow up your brain with dynamite. It is going to be, I can tell you this, we've already had a long conversation, so I know where this is kind of heading, and it's going to rock you. So stick with me next week. I hope to have that one up by Friday. But the implant thing, right? Very interesting. Now Lou's talking about implants. So I did some digging, and there's a great article from 2017 in Vice about the surgeon who claims to rid his patients of extraterrestrial implants. This is December 4, 2017. And you can see some images from the documentary that Jeremy Corbell did. It's called Patient 17, and this article is about that documentary. So Patient 17 is this documentary here. And I'll see if I can play the trailer. I hope YouTube doesn't ding me. Sometimes when I play a trailer, I get zapped, and I'm not allowed to do anything with the video. So this is the documentary. It's called Patient 17. It's about Dr. Roger Lear, the doctor who was taking implants out of people. Let's just watch it. It's about 2 minutes long. You'll hear Jeremy in this, and this is from 2017.
This is the most significant pieces of actual UFO and extraterrestrial data we have ever seen.
Who are we? Are we alone? And where are we actually sitting within the architecture of our universe?
Those are great questions.
I was recently introduced to a surgeon who claims to remove implants, nanotechnology microchips embedded by aliens.
Dr. Roger Lear did confirm I was going to be patient number 17.
It's this little spot here that shows through.
Yeah, it was right there.
They send half the object in for analysis and tell us whether the material is from off planet.
We're talking about something that is highly advanced and fabricated by an intelligence, is that correct?
Yes.
I don't have any answers. I'm still doubting Thomas on what this could possibly be. I just want all this to end. I just want it removed. This is scarier than hell.
Wow. We have a total of 36 elements here.
This is the most astounding array of elements in a single sample I've ever seen.
It's the biggest story of the 20th and 21st centuries. It's the biggest story never told.
I've been trying for months to get a hold of Steve. He's changed his phone number, won't answer any of my messages.
What are your thoughts?
I'm telling you, it's not from here. This sample did not come from our solar system, much less the Earth.
All right, Patient 17. I haven't seen it. but I want to now because I know of Roger Lear and I've read up on his. Ooh, let me turn this up. I've been following his story for a while. So this gets more interesting. So that's the documentary, and then I was like, oh, okay, Roger Lear. Let's dig into Roger Lear. Now, if you go to friend of the show, badaliens.info. Here, let's go there now. If you go to badaliens.info and you go to abductions and you scroll down, there's Dr. Lear. And this is basically what he concluded from removing implants. No inflammatory or rejection reaction by the body, no visible portal of entry, collections of specialized nerve endings surrounding the object, an outer coating of ceramic biological material, a metallic phase where inorganic metal becomes biological tissue, the emission of radio waves, which are deep space frequencies in the FM band. Brett, this is for you. Electromagnetic fields in excess of 10 milligauss, composition of meteoric iron, rare earth metals such as U-236, non-terrestrial isotopic ratios, the existence of carbon nanotubes, carbon nanostrands or nanofibers. This is interesting. Gold spheres, metallic caverns, resistance to ordinary cutting techniques such as metallic sawing or severing with a cutting instrument. Now, there's two different types of implants that I've noticed. Like, this is the photo that's on the badaliens.info site for the implants that Roger Lear took out. But these are clearly, to me, human-made RFID chips. That's all this is. Like, probably this, for sure that. These are definitely medical implants. This one is this one. So this looks a little weird, and some of these look like a shark's tooth or look kind of strange. When I talk to Jesse Beltran next week about his implant research, we go into depth on some of this stuff, and what he found out is pretty crazy. But you can see here, if I go to the Atlantic article, there's a traditional standard medical RFID chip that you could have implanted in your hand. So what's interesting about this is, like, it just got me on this implant thread thinking about it. And I remembered that Stephen Greer, back years and years ago, did an interview with a guy named William Pollack, who is a security expert. His specialty was designing security systems for facilities where we store our most classified stuff. So, like, he would be the guy that they would hire to go in and create the security, multiple overlapping layers of security systems and electronic security that lock down an entire facility. And he's a really smart guy. And there's this fascinating interview, and I've got it pulled up here. Let me see if I can do this. I only have 9 minutes, and then I gotta wrap it up. This is just sort of a preview, teeing up what we're going to talk about next week. But here's what he had to say about implants back in 1979. Here we go.
Back through satellite linkages. We time multiplexed with their data going back and forth for their shipping. And this led to a lot of other projects. And eventually, even when I finally left that, my own firm that we helped start in '84, I started working for Beltway Bandit type consulting firms. This would be SIC, Tracor, EGMG, etc., either as a contractor for them or as an employee for a period of time. It was at this time, again, that I realized that there was something amiss.
All right, so that's just kind of some background on who he is and who he works with. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and this is where he starts talking about implants.
That I got involved with that relates to this when we talk about alternative government control mechanisms. In that one of my favorite hobbies has always been tracking new technologies. and hopefully so it benefits in business. And in '79, living and working in Denver, I came across a company that, if necessary, I can provide documents for, that I've kept on file, of a company in North Glen, Colorado, which is a northern suburb of Denver, was developing an implantable chip originally for horses, because was a major problem then, and it may be still today, of shilling of horses. You would have two horses that look alike, and you would put the dog in, and you'd bet against him when everybody thinks it's the fast one, or you'd reverse that and bet against him. And he was attempting, through good faith, to develop a technology to give a unique signature to every single horse. That pill, if you want to call it that, intelligent pill, at the time was already small enough by then to implant under the skin with a horse needle, a large hypodermic needle. And I was shown these, and they worked. And we could read them with a primitive hand wand type reader from about 7 or 8 feet away. And this was still primitive technology. Excuse me. Now, at the time in the security industry, a lot of us had a lot of concerns about tracking and locating people that had been kidnapped, particularly what was going on in Europe at the time, where we were having NATO officers, even the Prime Minister of Italy, kidnapped. And these people were drained, or they were brutalized, or both. And one of the goals of the industry was to develop technology that would allow us to track these people or locate them quickly, hopefully to save their lives, but on a secondary basis to keep them from being drained of sensitive information. And I brought this technology to a meeting in a skiff room in Virginia that was arranged by a friend of mine with the CIA and another friend of mine with the State Department at the time, to introduce this technology to what we felt at the time were the right parties to use this new technology responsibly. Now, I hadn't heard about the remnant or any other religious beliefs at the time that said that everybody was going to be implanted with some sort of marking system, la the beast or 666. I wasn't even aware of that stuff at the time. And I was taking this as a serious solution to a potentially a problem that would not go away. And it was interesting, we met in this room, and because of the tight meetings we were involved with, certain people would not give you their full name or where they came from. I just had to trust that my two contacts had contacted the right parties to be there at the right time, and that they would all be responsible individuals. There was a mistake. After that meeting, I discovered that 2 of the people in the meeting had never been asked there, yet they knew about the meeting, they knew what it was about, they knew who was going to be there, and later research indicated that one of them actually worked for the Department of Agriculture and one of them worked for the Department of the Treasury. What prompted our looking at these 2 men was that the way they asked the questions they asked, the attitude behind them, even the body language, indicated that they had reasons for the use of this technology other than the one that was intended at the meeting. In fact, their largest concern was, how fast could we make a couple billion of them? And could we each give each one of those a unique identity number? Now, this particular pill-shaped device, very minute, had a lot of flexibility in its capabilities. It was basically just almost a transponder. You would send a frequency to it, and it would respond back with its unique number, which could not be changed once the chip was made. Yet there were a lot of capabilities that could be added to this chip, such as monitoring temperature, blood pressure, pulse, and even waveforms out of the brain. But that was for research down the road. What was amusing to me a few months ago on a website that likes to collect articles on the unusual is that a lady out east had a chip removed from her body in 1999. And they had it blown up on the website. And it was a slight modification of this chip from Denver. with some of its enhancements. And it was put in her, she believes, in either 1980 or 1981. What was amusing about this was that this gentleman never had to worry about money again. And he quietly passed on a lot of this technology to somebody we never knew. And this concerned my contacts in Washington.
That's all the time we have for today. But needless to say, there's a lot more to this implant story than meets the eye, and it's a little it's weird. It's really weird. I think there's definitely some non-human technology involved, but I don't know that it's involved in the way that we might think. At least not at first. It's very interesting. I'm excited to do this interview next week. We'll see what we learn from that. But yeah, really interesting stuff. Health issues. Let's see. Sorry, I should probably. DARPA developing nanochips for monitoring troop health. Business Insider 2012. Hey, great find. That's right. So yeah, Lou's talking about implants. Dr. Lear was talking about implants. William Pollack's talking about implants. They were doing these back in the 70s. They had them as early as the early 80s in people. They're being removed. And these are made here by us. So if you extrapolate that out another 20, 30, 40 years, would we be using nanotechnology and advanced materials in implants if we were making them today? Sure, that makes sense. But what are they for? And what do they do? That's the other question. Who knows? Let's do this. Hey, all right. So that's it. I have to wrap it there, guys. I have a short day today, but we're going to be back next week. We're going to talk about. I'm going to finish Imminent by then, and we'll go into that and see what I think about the end of the story. Quick shout out to members: Anthony Haley, Stephanie Erickson, Brett Higgins, Teresa Bailey, producer Brandon, Thistle's Last Stand, the bearded UFO guy Gas, Shadow Patriot Terry, Charlie Fisher, Zendra Zero, Goldbridge, EMG, Miss K, Alminius, Dr. Arfuz, paging Dr. Arfuz, Joseph Christopher, A. Huff, Christian Dane, Susita NM, Heather Willow, Ding Ding 81, Proud Vermin, Avi Z, Christopher Hovord, Pack Rat, Fight Trader, Mark Bates, Brian Jackson, Sage Sleuth, Blood Willow 1, KT, Sage Wildheart, Prickly G, Enzo Surreal, Joe R, Mads K, Planet Algol, Windy Woo, Rory, Lauren Olivia, Chameleon UK, Boof Proof, Shardul, Scott A, Julia Scott, Lauren Klutz, Jason Carnes, Indrid Cole, Derek Doherty, Miss Smarty Pants, Rumesh Lance, Paul SJ, NCC, Real Fun NJ, Andrew L, Bulgin Nabel, Trinimac, BMO Stoked, LC, Cruel Handsome, Paris Diamonds, Neil, Devil-Eyed Elvis. These are great names. Rachel Ann Ambrose, Charlie Stewart, Romello, Alan, Brian, Kurgan, Edward Cox, Nidu, Mystical Wonderland, Edward Ruff, Matt Orr, Chris Collin Lopez, Christopher Tucker, Sylvian Savard, Scott Cullen, D in the House, End of Days, Corey T, Corey Feldman, Ian Riley, Stuntman, Random Content, Neil Daniels, Reign of Rain, and Tony Laycock. Thank you for being members. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thanks for being here. You guys are great. We'll be back next week. Monday, members only Monday. That's at 2 p.m. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Friday, 2 p.m. We're sticking to it. And I'm going to have a bunch of interviews coming out soon. So looking forward to that. Hit me up in the comments. Shoot me an email. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you on the next one. Keep looking up.